Hello and welcome to this installment of the KansasPlanner.com web-based training. My name is Andrew Foster and today we're going to be talking about the ESF 14 section of the Kansas Planning Standards. Today during this presentation I'm going to primarily be going over the overview of the ESF 14 Kansas Planning Standards. If you'd like to know more about how to operate the super system, you can find that information in this link that you see here. Just follow it and it'll take you to a YouTube video that demonstrates how to complete the Annex Actions and Annex Details section. So I've got about 6 slides here that I'm going to go through, and the 6 slides you'll see there are items in red, and that is from the Kansas Planning Standards, and items in black and bolded black, and that's information that we've gathered from different workshops and trainings that people have brought up and said that that's what they may include in their plan. One thing to note here as you look through this is that this information is something to help guide you get through the process. However, you're still going to need to add more information about your jurisdiction and about your county in order to complete the emergency operations plan and the KansasPlanner.com system. So with that being said, let's go ahead and begin. The first thing we want to talk about is rapid impact assessment. And the question asks, identify agencies or organizations that are responsible or organizations of rapid impact assessment team. And then here you have some information that the rapid impact assessment has to follow this criteria and these reporting protocols. And this is what they include, such as the number of people in the area, the number of persons evacuated. You want to identify who is going to do this. And so what some people have said is the initial overview, at least the rapid impact assessment itself, of the scene is going to be completed by the emergency management staff or local law enforcement. And they say that partially because law enforcement's initially going to be out there, or fire, or some public safety, whoever you designate that is first at the scene, is going to go out there and take a look at what's going on and give that initial assessment. And so what we have here is the items that they would call out and say, these are the things that we're looking at. These homes are destroyed and so forth. And then after you get through the initial size up, you'll get a little more detailed where you can expand on some of those things. The next item that it talks about is environmental assessment, and it asks, describe the methods of identifying long-term environmental restoration issues. And some people have talked about this and said that the Kansas Department of Health and Environment is going to be responsible for a lot of the long-term environmental restoration issues, and they're going to be at least responsible for identifying what it is that needs to happen and offering you those recommendations about what you can do to protect the environment. And then KDHE may address the issues to include, but not limited to, they're going to talk about air, water, soil, hazardous materials, and so forth. They're also going to be heavily involved in the process of any debris management or debris removal and separation and all of those processes and protocols. You'll want to go through here and expand on that and identify how that all is going to happen with the coordination of KDHE. Or if your local agencies have the ability to do that, also include that in there as well. The next item that it asks about is identify the agency responsible who's trained and equipped for conducting a chemical or radiological assessment of a contaminated structure. Now, primarily we think of radiological type of events being associated with, say, Wolf Creek Power Plant or something like that. However, a lot of hospitals and a lot of other organizations have small amounts of radioactive material, and so if there is some sort of contamination, you should at least have that discussion and identify where that stuff is located now and what you may be able to do in order to respond to that type of incident. And so a lot of people have said, which I think is probably true, is that your county is going to have really limited resources for conducting chemical and radiological assessment. And the county is going to use those regional hazmat teams that are available for doing the assessment. And then you're going to talk to KDHE and Department of Agriculture as you need to or as is required. And that you should look to ESF 10 where you really address the issues of hazardous materials, especially with radiological materials. And just look towards that and expand upon that process as best as you can. Continuing on with environmental assessment, it asks, identify the agency that's responsible in assessing contamination of water, air, food, and ingestion. And so you'll want to break it out here. I've kind of given you the short version, but KDHE, the Department of Agriculture, your local health departments, the EPA, there's a handful of organizations that have some responsibility for assessing the contamination of water, air, food, or any other ingestion hazard. And you want to specifically say For instance, that KDHE may be responsible for food in this case, and Department of Ag may be responsible for food in this case, or so forth. And then the same thing goes for air, water, and so forth. And also, whatever your local health departments or your local agencies' responsibilities are when it comes to those, make sure you identify that as well. The next question that it asks is identify the agency responsible for conducting environmental assessment for a biological event. Primarily, when we talk about a biological event, your local health department is going to be the first person that's involved in it until they're overwhelmed with the event or until it goes outside of their initial capabilities. And they're going to probably coordinate with KDHE and possibly the CDC for conducting environmental assessment for a biological event. And you'll just want to talk to your health departments about how biological events happen or how biological event response happens and just kind of spell that out. The next thing we talk about is the different types of disaster declarations that happen. And we want you to summarize the types of disaster declarations that may be issued by federal officials and these types of assistance that may be made. And this includes individual assistance, public assistance, and then hazard mitigation. Now, all of these you can spell out here and give a detailed description of, and I think it's probably a good idea to give a good detailed description. However, individual assistance, public assistance, and specifically hazard mitigation are all issues that are talked about in the county's hazard mitigation plan. And so it's okay to reference that county hazard mitigation plan because I believe everyone has one right now as of the recording of this video. Everyone has a current plan or will be having a current plan. So you can either go there and get that information and drag it out and put it in the system, or you can just reference that it's in the mitigation plan and that's where it lives. Okay, the next item that we talk about is other needs consideration. We ask for you to describe the process to coordinate with housing authorities and ESF 6 for short or long-term recovery efforts. We know that after a disaster, there's going to be issues that related to ESF 14 and ESF 6 that's going to require some housing to be set up. And so a lot of people have said that the county has a limited ability, and a lot of the rural counties especially are going to have very limited resources when it comes to supporting the long-term recovery effort. And the county is probably going to have to work to expedite the PDA process in order to facilitate the declarations. And then you may use organizations such as FEMA, Housing and Urban Development, and so forth to support that long-term recovery effort. And that the ESF is going to coordinate with the ESF6 and work with that transition from the sheltering in order to a short or long-term housing process as your county sees fit. Now just go through there and define, because a lot of counties are going to do it differently, and just define kind of what your capabilities are, and then also say how you're going to go about doing that process of transitioning from sheltering to short or long-term housing. The next item that we talk about is describe the methods of identifying long-term recovery needs of special needs populations and incorporating those needs into your recovery strategies. Now, emergency management is going to coordinate with the local and state health departments for everyone. And then when you talk about incorporating those people that may have vulnerable needs or special needs, you're going to make sure that you're complying with the ADA process as best as feasible by your depending on the disaster and what your organization has. And then also you want to say that when something happens, if it exceeds your capability and if there's an individual with an ADA need, that you go ahead and you contact the state ADA coordinator and talk to that person about what assistance the state may be able to provide in terms of helping out with the population that's affected. If you have any questions about how to plan for vulnerable populations, you can always call the state ADA coordinator, and he'll give you plenty of information about how you can include ADA concerns in the plan. Okay, continuing on with other needs considerations. It says describe the methods of coordination with animal welfare and agriculture stakeholders and service providers in long-term community recovery efforts. And some people have said that this ESF is going to flatly coordinate with the ESF6 and coordinate with the ESF11 for coordination of animal welfare and agriculture stakeholders for long-term community recovery efforts. It's kind of repeating the question there. So you want to go through and spell out a little bit about what that coordination looks like. You're going to have to define how you do that in your organization and looking at the long-term recovery of your community. The next item that we look at is describe coordination with ESF 6 and ESF 8 regarding behavior and mental health assistance. And so here I have, it looks like it was from another county, Pawnee County, that I have this one. Your county is going to use, hopefully, your either county or regional mental health center if you have one. And then you're going to look at first your local and then your region, and then if your region's unable to do it, you're going to look at what the state may have to offer. And then you're going to use those health services as best as possible in order to make sure that mental health is taken care of, because we all know that after a disaster, there's going to be a lot of issues and a lot of anxiety and a lot of emotions going on. And we want to make sure that everyone gets taken care of. So just spell out who it is that you're talking to and how ESF 14 is going to go and talk with ESF 6 and ESF 8 with those mental health providers. And ESF 8 already talks about mental health services, and so you can also say see ESF 8 for that. Okay, so that's most of the information that you'll need to include. It's a very brief overview of that information, and so make sure that you look through all of those things. You can find the Kansas Planning Standards online and go through and look and make sure you're including all of the information that you need into that section of the EOP in order to complete the ESF 14 section. So now let's take a look at the file archive section with ESF 14. These are all attachments that are required to be attached to the file archives, and I'll briefly go through and talk about them. The first thing that you want to do is a list of necessary contacts as related to ESF 14, such as those people who may have access to, or those people that are in your Housing and Urban Development Center, and so forth, and those different contacts. The next thing you want to look at is any forms or logs that you may use for ESF 14 response activities. A good one here is your rapid impact assessment criteria. That stuff is available in a form, and if you look at that, that'll help you expedite your rapid impact assessment, which is the next one there, and so that would be your sample form. And then any other plans, procedures that you have for notifying either staff, facilities, or departments, or any other plans that you may have available, include those into the file archives, and you'll be able to complete that pretty easy. The big one in the attachments here that you're looking at is your contacts. You want to make sure that you're able to contact the correct people at the correct time for ESF 14. Once you've got all that information entered into the plan, you can take a look at your reports. This is under the Reports tab on the main menu. You can look through it and you can make sure that you've entered all the information correctly. And please go through and verify that you've formatted your information that you've entered correctly and that it's all clear and concise and you don't have a lot of empty or dead space in there. If you have any questions about this, please feel free to contact the Kansas Division of Emergency Management Planning section. And we'd be happy to go through all of this stuff one-on-one with you or to answer any specific questions that you may have about anything. Thank you.